So it is now official. Then there was one. In the words of Connor McLeod of the Clan McLeod, there can be only one. It's been announced that one of the last remaining Blockbusters in the world in Australia is closing down at the end of the month, which means the Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon is going to be the final Blockbuster surviving in the world. It is indeed, if you will, the end of an era. It is the absolute end of an era, much like, physical media is going away. Hence the Blockbusters, the purveyors of all things physical media, are disappearing. And this is, of course, something everybody saw coming for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, some people might even be surprised to know that there's still at least one Blockbuster in the world to date. But Rob, you here, talk about for a minute, Blockbuster, what it used to represent, and how you feel about it coming to an end here.
Well, one of the things that video stores, I think, did for movies was video stores, home video in the 80s and 90s, excited the world. You could go to a store that was just full of movies that you either had seen and wanted to see again, or movies you'd never seen before, and you could go there with friends or talk to perfect strangers about recommendations or the people behind the counter. And it made movies were still cherished because you had to go somewhere. You had to get in a car. You had to go there. And when you got there, you'd spend time there. You didn't just flick a switch. And if you didn't like something, you'd turn it off after like 2 minutes and watch something else. You stuck with it. You rented a tape. It was a whole ritual. And it made movies special.
Yeah,
and
I remember
not so much now.
Me and my friends, because there used to be a bunch of us that lived, a bunch of our buddies, fresh out of college. We lived in this big house together that my buddy Rodney owned, and a bunch of us all lived there. And it was 3 or 4 times a week. It was the ritual. We'd all go out. Like if any of us were dating anybody at the time, we'd all go out with our respective girlfriends at the time. It was a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
You'd go to Blockbuster. You'd peruse the aisles. One of the biggest relationship problems facing couples at the time was the breakdown of relationships in Blockbuster video, because there's always nonstop arguments. You always see couples angry at each other because they couldn't decide on a movie they wanted to get. But there was a social aspect to it at that point. There was a social aspect. You go out, you probably stop off together with people, grab something to eat, pick up your movies, go back. And it was kind of a social experience to do that. And that was the thing I remember most fondly about not just Blockbuster, but like in Canada, we also had Rogers Video. We had a few other things. And just that whole, it's the social angle that I think I miss most. Like even when I first moved to LA, when I moved into Los Angeles, the first place I lived was right in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard. And right about 3 blocks up from where I lived on Sunset Boulevard, there was still a block. Do you remember that Blockbuster Video on Sunset?
Oh yeah.
It was still there when I moved here. It closed shortly after, but it was still there.
And
when
that was
I
a
moved
big
here.
Blockbuster.
It was huge.
That was like a flag. And you could judge your potential mates. You could take them into the Blockbuster, and you didn't even have to say anything, and you could judge them. If they wouldn't watch foreign films, they wanted to pick up only rom-coms.
Judge them.
You could secretly judge your potential mate.
That was a way to just, bump into people, bump into strangers and talk about films. Like now, it's kind of like a bookstore, but at the same time, even bookstores, when you go in, it's more of like a personalized thing because you're picking a book for yourself. But when you're going to Blockbuster, you can pick it out. Everyone was talking to each other. You talk to the guy at the counter, like you said. And it was an activity. Now we just, we buy books on our phones and Kindles, and it's all going to shit.
And my favorite memory of this is going back a couple of years, but this is when Blockbuster had long been gone. One of my favorite things about Blockbuster, this is one of my favorite experiences ever. So I'm at Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and I'm interviewing Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis about, what was that political comedy they did? The Candidate or something along that line. Do you remember they did that political election comedy a few years ago? Anyway, I was interviewing them for that. And I had introduced, at the time I was working with AMC, and I said, I'm John Campea with AMC. Zach Galifianakis, who was just joking, goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about you guys." And Will Ferrell looks at him and goes, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, they announced this morning that AMC Theaters is closing down. And Will Ferrell looks at me and goes, "Is that true?" And I just played along. I'm like, yeah, it's true. And he goes, "Oh, man." And Will Ferrell reached into his wallet and he pulled out like a couple of dollars and handed me a couple of bucks. So then Zach Galifianakis reached into his wallet, handed me like $40. And then Will Ferrell went back into his wallet again, pulled out $100 bill. And by the way, and then Anne took that first dollar bill that Will Ferrell gave me and she framed it for me. I still to this day have the dollar bill that Will Ferrell gave me hanging in my place. But then, Galifianakis is like, "Oh, that's not going to do it." And Will Ferrell's like, "Well, shit, man, that's all the money I have here. Just wait." And Will Ferrell pulls out his Blockbuster video card. And he goes, "This has got to be worth something, right?" He goes, "This has got to be some kind of collectible." And Galifianakis goes, "Oh, yeah, that's got to be worth something." And then Ferrell goes, "Because, man, I just bought like 10,000 shares of Blockbuster. That's got to have been a wise decision, right?" And everybody's just joking around. And it was one of the funniest Blockbuster's memories to me. But yeah, it is the sad end of an era. And I'm going to miss, I'm saying I'm sad, but the reality is that Blockbuster at the end of not Santa Monica, Sunset Boulevard, I was there it was still open for a good year and a half that I was there. And I think I walked to it once. So I guess I had stopped using it too, but here's hoping they can keep it alive. And
now that it's gone, you want to go in,
Yes, it's the class thing, right? You break up with the toxic person you're dating, and then you're like, you only think about the good things about it. You're like, well, maybe I should go back. But the other thing is, remember, a lot of people forget that Blockbuster tried to change. I mean, they tried to get into the digital business. First, they tried to copy the Netflix model of emailing or mailing out the discs to people. That didn't work out. They tried to get into the digital space, but they kind of did it half-assed. That didn't work out. And here we are. So who knows? Maybe that last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon can keep the flame alive. And it'd be nice if it did.